me, that's my newspaper out there, the New Federalist. As people may know, I'm running as an independent candidate for U.S. Senate against Gillibrand. But the first thing I would encourage people to do is to go on your phone and look up something called Grasso Abrazo, and that's Grasso Abrazo. You can look while I'm speaking. This is a photograph taken some years ago of Nick Grasso, who was then the head of the New York Stock Exchange, meeting in the jungle with the Comandante of the FARC in Colombia. So when the New York Times does an expose about the drug cartels running human trafficking, you know for sure, since it's the New York Times, it is not the whole story, and it's much bigger. Also, what people here may not be aware of, that the Italian island Lampedusa, which was prepared with tents and cots to handle 400 people, that's the first place that a lot of the people fleeing North Africa go if they don't drown in the Mediterranean. They were hit over 2 days with 7,000 people, between 7 and 9,000. How could this all be happening simultaneously? In other words, it's not an accident, and it's international, and it's very big money. I went to the Roosevelt Hotel, thank God I studied a little bit of French in high school, because the people that I met on the sidewalk were all from West Africa. And the fellow I spoke with from Mauritania told me that people basically came to the country, said, Biden's over the gates, give us $5,000, you can get on an airplane and fly to Nicaragua and then come up here. If you reverse that route and you start in Ibero-America, what you will see is that the human trafficking routes are the same, they're the reverse of the drug trafficking routes. That doesn't mean the people are the drug traffickers, that means that the cartels are making money both ways. They're making money from the drugs, and they're making money by having desperately poor people pay exorbitant amounts and then using them for slave labor, which is my third point. If you have 60 days worth of housing in New York, but you can't get a work visa for 6 months, that means you have 4 months where you're out with no means to support yourself. What does that lend itself to? Crime, drugs, sex workers, slave labor, okay? So this is clearly what they are designing. I have 2 other points. And I'm just throwing these things out there because I think these are the questions that we have to get to the bottom of. I don't know if people here remember the name Fletcher Prouty. If you saw Oliver Stone's film JFK, there was a Mr. X, a Secret Service guy who had been on Kennedy's security detail, and he was shipped off to Antarctica a week before Kennedy went to Dallas. Fletcher Prouty described that the way they started the war in Vietnam was to move 1 million people from the north to the south with no food, no family, no work, etc. So you have to ask, who wants to try and instigate a civil war in the United States? Who wants to try and get people so worked up that we end up in chaos and violence, and why? And what does that have to do with Wall Street and the City of London and the cartels? Because this thing goes from the top. And I will say, as people may know, the bubble of outstanding derivatives obligations held by the City of London and Wall Street is in the order of quadrillions of dollars. This system is crashing, it's bankrupt. As you may have heard, and in my paper, there is a new system coming into order because our genius, senile president has put unilateral sanctions on Russia and all these other places, so they said, okay, we don't mind, we're getting off the Titanic. We're going to set up our own system. We're going to go back to gold-backed currency. We're going to build nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants and high-speed railroads and deep-water ports all of the stuff you're not building in the US. And I will say a hypothesis because I looked up something for the record I wanted to know about immigration in the United States. In the year 1907, 1.2 million immigrants entered the United States legally. Our nation had only 87 million people at the time. Now, we had issues, right? People didn't like the Irish, people didn't like the Italians. It wasn't like it was smooth and happy, but what was our name? We were building things, we were growing, we had industry, people had jobs, we knew who every person was, they were vetted. If you extrapolate 1.2 million with 87 million people to 330 million, if we were bringing in immigrants at the same rate per capita today, we would be able to handle triple the number coming in legally and illegally. But we can't. Why? Well, because obviously we are not taking care of the people here. We don't have housing, we don't have jobs, we don't have food. We're shutting down everything that generates growth. But I say that because I know that most of us are here because of somebody who immigrated to this country. And part of the problem I think that they're having is Americans are not cold-hearted, bigoted jerks. We're going to start beating people up when they get off a boat. And they want that to happen. So I'm just saying we have to be smart about this. It is very evil. It is very big. These people don't care an iota for the life of anyone. They want to make us complicit in their crimes. And their fear, I think, is that if you look at what's happening in Africa, where the French African nations are throwing out the French, what you see is a shadow of the American Revolution. We were the first successful anti-colonial revolution. If we get wind of what's actually happening in some of these countries, that they're just saying, no, take your LGBTQ, trans, whatever, and shove it, we're gonna build a power plant, we're not gonna go along with this anymore. Americans would say, hey, why are we going along with this crap? And our nation would regain its identity. And I think in part that is the fear. So as I said, these were just a few. I want to make sure I didn't forget anything of what I wanted to tell you. Yeah, so I think we have to consider all these things. Who designed the gap in the housing and the work permit? How is it that at the same time we're being flooded, you have 7,000 people crossing into Lampedusa? How is it that the head of the FARC Colombian cocaine cartel is hugging the head of the New York Stock Exchange? Is that what's going on? Why does the New York Times only do half the story, which is the drug cartel? But they don't tell you who's not prosecuting the drug cartel. And the last point is, as we all know, the NSA, CIA, FBI, Google, and everything else that monitors us through our smartphones can find any iota of crime anywhere in the world that they want. And they don't. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. She's also the candidate for U.S. Senate. Make sure.